You're listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Annette Presley about how to be confident in your beliefs about nutrition and health, even when they go against the mainstream. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey there, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, your host as always, and today is my first interview back from maternity leave, which is really exciting, a little scary, I'm not gonna lie, but the conversation I had with my guest today was really fun, and I only had one brain fart. So I was really proud of myself. So my guest today is Annette Presley. Annette is a registered dietitian of over 30 years, certified functional nutritionist, certified Theta Healer, author, speaker, and creator of the Revive Method. After discovering that the diet advice she'd learned as a dietitian was contributing to chronic disease, Annette changed course to learn about functional nutrition and nutrigenomics, which is how nutrition affects genetic expression. And she learned about the root cause protocol. Now Annette helps women get to the root of their health issues so they can stop feeling like crap and get their life and their joy back. So our conversation today definitely went a few different directions, but it all really centered around this idea of standing up for what you believe when it comes to nutrition and wellness and health. I know a lot of you listening are health entrepreneurs, not everybody, but a lot of my listeners, because that's who I serve now in my business. And I hear this a lot where people are nervous about doing things that are not like 100% towing the line of what they learned in school or what their professional organization recommends. And there can be a lot of fear about what's going to happen if somebody finds out I'm recommending this or doing that with my clients. And I know it can be really scary because nobody wants to get in trouble. A lot of us dietitians are very type A, goody two shoes. We don't like getting in trouble. So, we want to do what's right, but also, when you've learned about alternative approaches, functional medicine, that kind of thing, you realize that the way that we approach nutrition in the conventional space is a lot of times not actually evidence-based or not really helping people. And especially when you run your own business, my hope, and really, all the clients I work with, this is their goal. You want to help people. You want to actually help them get the result in their health that they want. And what a lot of times that creates is this desire to find what is the best way, regardless of what the conventional guidelines say. And to be fair, they're not always wrong, right? Like there's conventional guidelines that are accurate, but there's a lot that aren't. And it's something where when you really want to help people, like I know I do, a lot of my clients do, all of my clients do, and most of you listening, if you're someone in the entrepreneurial space, especially in the health space, you want to help people get results. It sometimes leads you down a path where now you're finding out stuff that is not accurate or not helpful that you had learned in school. So Annette is kind of infamous in the dietetics community for being the one that got in trouble kind of thing. So I was really excited to get to chat with her about her experience and what happened and, how she overcame it and now what she's doing. And it's just really cool to see that even in the face of that big challenge where her own peers were coming after her and wanting to shut her down or wanting to make her change her ways, that she stood firm in her beliefs and was able to defend those beliefs with evidence and now is able to practice in the way that she wants to and really is able to help people in the way that she feels great about. So that's possible for you too. And I hope that our conversation today inspires you to be courageous when it comes to defending your hard-earned beliefs about how to best help people with health and nutrition. So without further ado, here is registered dietitian Annette Presley. All right, everyone. Well, I am super excited to have with us on the Fed and Fearless podcast today, Annette Presley. Welcome to the show, Annette.
Hi, thanks, Laura. So happy to be here.
Yeah, and I feel like I've known about you through my mom for like a really long time. And when I say a really long time, I mean like probably
Well,
close to 10 years, I would guess.
yeah, it's been at least 10 years.
Yeah, which in internet years, that's like 70 or something, right? I think they're like dog years. So it's really cool that we get to finally connect. And we have a really interesting topic to cover today that is going to kind of weave in between the nutrition side of things and also the business and entrepreneurship side of things. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So just so our audience can get to know you better, tell us just in a nutshell, like what led you to become a dietitian? Because I know that you've been a dietitian for a while, and for some of our listeners, like, oh, well, I think that's really cool. My mom's been doing it for a while, but I think you might have been doing it for longer. And I think it's really cool that, that you've been able to adapt with the changing times, as opposed to like, some of the people that have been doing it for a long time, they kind of get stuck in their ways. They don't do the whole online thing. So I think it's really cool that you've seen probably a lot of changes as far as like what the possibilities for dietitians are when it comes to their career. But I would love to hear, how did you get into this field?
Well, I was actually in high school and we had aerobics for PE and I loved it. And I thought I'm going to be an aerobics instructor. So I would go to the store and pick up Shape magazine periodically and I'd read it, but it was really the nutrition articles that fascinated me. So when I went to college, I put nutrition down as my major. I had no idea you could major in it, but I just figured I'll put it down and see what happens. And nobody said I couldn't. And then right after high school that summer, I took a nutrition class, and that's where I found out about dietitians. And so that's kind of how I got into it.
That's funny. I feel like, honestly, my getting into dietetics is not a whole lot different. We did aerobics in gym class, and I picked up Shape and Women's Health magazines. And that was like, I think back to the stack of magazines that I would have every month. And my mom wasn't super happy about that, but I feel like a very similar reason that I was interested in nutrition and health and fitness and all of that. So, and when did you become a dietitian?
It's in 1991.
The 1900s. So cool. Yeah. So I bet a lot of stuff has changed since you first became a dietitian. And I know that you mentioned as part of your bio that there was this transitional time where you changed from maybe more of like the conventional, traditional dietetics belief system to more of that like functional, holistic belief system. So when did that happen, and what led to that?
So that happened about 14 years into being a dietitian, and I was preparing to do a talk on fat at a local health food store and decided I want to brush up on my fat chemistry. So Amazon actually recommended the book Know Your Fats by Mary Enig. She's a PhD in fat chemistry. And so I was reading the book. The first chapter was fine. I got to the second chapter, and ever since then, like everything she said contradicted what I had been taught about saturated fat and cholesterol. And normally, we're kind of taught to automatically dismiss anything that goes against what we're taught. But I knew she was right about trans fats. And so I couldn't really just dismiss her. And I had to at least acknowledge that if she's right about that, she could possibly be right about saturated fat. So I need to look into this. Because my goal as a dietitian was really to help people. And so I just wanted to make sure I was giving advice that was actually helping and not harming. So I spent about a year going through all the science on saturated fat and cholesterol. I went through her references. And by the end of it, the only conclusion I could come to was she was right and I was wrong. So I was really angry at that point because I had spent 14 years giving out really bad advice. I sometimes joke that I have a license to kill. I mean, it's just, that's how bad it was. So I had three decisions to make. I mean, I could either continue with what I had been teaching and ignore what I had just learned, or I could change what I was teaching, or I could quit. And I decided to quit. But God had other plans. So he was pretty like, you can't quit. Somebody needs to tell the truth. So, so I stayed in it. I changed what I taught, knowing that I could get in trouble for this. And I did get away with it for about 3 years. And then the local dietetic association filed a complaint against me, basically for telling people to eat butter instead of margarine. And of course, today, most people are going to be like, what? That's crazy. Like, everybody knows butter is better.
Well, you think so. I think sometimes when you're in the circle and you kind of like start to be like, oh, of course everybody knows this, then you'll find out later it's like, oh no, they're still teaching something different in some of these programs. So anyway, continue.
Yeah. So it was really interesting. I mean, the board, every board member signed this letter, and none of them had ever talked to me about it. Like, hey, Annette, we're worried that you're giving out really bad advice or anything. This just really hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I responded with like, this is what happened. And so the national organization decided that I had been deceived and needed an educational intervention. It was really interesting. All the letters they sent me treated me like I was a 5-year-old. And they put a quote from an expert in there, a nameless expert, who would just insult me personally. It was crazy. So anyway, they decided that I needed to write a paper on LDL cholesterol, which is supposedly the bad kind, and explain why I was going to go back to recommending vegetable oils instead of animal fats. And I had already spent a year going through all the science, so I knew what it said, and there was no way I was going to write that paper. So instead, I wrote a paper going through all the science on saturated fat and cholesterol, and just showed them that we have no scientific support for our fear of saturated fat and cholesterol. And that if they could show me where I was wrong in my assessment of the science, I would gladly change my views, because I didn't care what the truth was. I just wanted to make sure that what I was teaching was the truth.
Yeah. So you didn't have a dog in the fight necessarily, but you weren't going to just like be like, never mind, everything I said is wrong. And I'm just going to, go with what you're telling me to say. And gosh, that seems so, I mean, I guess I shouldn't be that surprised, especially after the last 2 years, how some of this stuff goes down. Yeah. But I'm just like, literally shocked. It sounds like the, Spanish Inquisition over here, like, just saying.
I know, over butter.
Which, I mean, my question is, what was the board worried about? Were they actually worried that you were like going to hurt people and that you were, doing dangerous things? Is that what their justification was for coming at you like that?
No, I really think their justification, I really think that most of our health policies are political and not science-based. Mm-hmm. So they don't actually care about the science. And that was obvious because they wouldn't even talk about the science with me. So they accused me of asking my own questions instead of relying on the questions that had already been asked and answered. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, how's that science? I mean, science is all about asking questions and challenging answers. I mean, if we can't do that, then it's a religion. It's not science.
Yeah. Well, and really science, it's funny. I was just spending some time with Chris Masterjohn, who I feel like, I don't know if you've met him personally, but we were talking about some stuff and he's like, if people know him, he's like ridiculous genius, like just the way he understands science most of the time is over my head. And I feel like I'm a pretty smart person. So, he'll talk about stuff and just really come back to this idea that like science is the practice of questioning things and, trying to disprove stuff. Like if somebody says this is the way it is, the whole way that science works is you're trying to disprove that. Or if you're the one that came up with the theory, you have to defend against people that are trying to disprove it. And that's actually what makes science work, that you're, right. That there's some level of defense there. So it is really interesting as somebody who went through a master's program in public health and just seeing the different way that our clinical and scientific stuff was taught, like biochemistry and, all the stuff that's more of the hard science versus, although I guess some people think public health is a hard science. I don't. But in our public health side of the program, it was so, they were basically just looking to prove their beliefs. And it was like I remember one time there was this one study they went over with us in a public health class, and they were the hypothesis or so. I don't even know if there was a hypothesis. I don't even know if that's how they do it in public health. I'm trying to remember if this is actually how studies were structured. I don't actually think they were, possibly. But they were like, we wanted to see if we could get, it was like, third graders to switch from whole milk to skim milk. And we're going to go through this whole intervention, and it's going to be this like super, detailed process where we're bringing people in to like go through this whole thing. And then by the end of it, the result was, hey, we got this many percentage of the kids to switch to skim milk, and it's this big success. And I just remember listening to this in class being like, what is the point? Like, you guys are actually making these kids less healthy. And whoever did this study is like patting themselves on the back about how, oh, we made this big change and it's going to make these kids so much healthier. And I'm just sitting there like gagging because I'm like, I can't believe, first of all, money's being spent on this. Second of all, they're teaching this to us in a really, high level institution, like one of the best public health institutions in the whole country. And this is what we're learning. And it was just this situation where I was like, this is such BS that they think that this is helping anybody. And in fact, it's actually probably causing harm, which I know you probably agree with if you're getting kids off of full fat dairy onto skim milk and considering that some kind of big accomplishment. It's like, yeah, okay, you guys successfully did that, but to what end? Like, does that actually benefit anybody? And is it actually causing harm? So that was something that always drove me kind of nuts about the public health education. Is not that public health in and of itself is a bad institution, or that the people that do it are, somehow like wanting to hurt people. Like, I think most people in the public health space, especially in nutrition, like they want to help people, but they're not asking questions about, is what we're trying to make happen actually good for people? Or are we just spending all this time, money, energy, effort to change things in a way that's actually at best useless, and at worst, in this situation, probably harmful. So I don't know why I just went on a little rant about that, but it kind of reminds me of that, where it's one of these things where it's like they just, unfortunately, in our profession, and it's not all dietitians, obviously, but unfortunately, a lot of the higher up people that are making the decisions, they tend to think about things as, the science is settled. We already know everything we need to know about nutrition, and now it's just a matter of getting these, Americans to listen to us and to change their ways, as opposed to asking like, hey, is what we're telling people to do actually helpful and accurate and benefiting people, right? So I'm guessing you have a similar experience, especially having been in dietetics for so long, seeing maybe the resistance to change, like the resistance to actually saying, hey, maybe we weren't totally right about what we were recommending 30 years ago, 20 years ago, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a huge resistance. And, it's funny because that kind of a study, what they would conclude from that is that skim milk is better than whole milk, even though they didn't test, the value of skim milk versus whole milk or anything like that. They just switched the use of it.
Well, and I feel like the study was based on the presumption that skim milk is better. It's like, oh, we're not even questioning that skim milk is better. We just want to know, can we get kids to drink skim milk? And it's like, you could do a study. Can we get kids to drink bleach? Okay, maybe you can. Is that something that you want to study? It's like just the assumption that these things are set in stone and that there's nothing that could be possibly inaccurate about it. That's what always frustrated me. It wasn't that the information was inaccurate, because science changes, right? It's not like people can be wrong, and it's not like everything I've ever believed in the course of my life has turned out to be correct. So it's like, and I think that's kind of, what you're expressing with the experience you had, where, there wasn't really this opportunity to discuss, hey, is this actually true? And is this accurate? And is this benefiting the people that we want to help?
Yeah. And that's really the sad part of it, is science is never going to be settled. you can follow the science all you want, but it's never going to be settled.
Yeah. I mean, isn't, you say follow the science, wouldn't that mean that you're following where it goes, not just being like, this is it, and we're never moving from here, and, everything's settled forever and there can be no questions about it. So I'm curious because I have a lot of clients that get nervous about talking about things that maybe they feel don't fully toe the line of what they were taught or what the guidelines are, that kind of thing. And when you're an entrepreneur and you're running your own business, the hope is that you can do what you feel is best. And I loved what you said a few minutes ago where you said your biggest concern was, are you actually helping people get good health outcomes? Which I feel like that's the number one question we should all be asking in our businesses. Like, is what I'm helping people do actually helping them? It's kind of the positive side of capitalism. Like, if you're really good at what you do, you make good money. So it's like you're motivated to do a good job. So for you, do you feel like, and see, this is where my postpartum brain gets like, oh, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with this? Oh, as far as I was saying to Annette before we hit record, this is my first interview since coming back from maternity leave. And I'm like, I'll just be happy if I get through without having like a brain fart. But that was one of them. So for those people that are running their own businesses that hear your story, because I feel like this was something that was talked about in a lot of the Facebook groups, like you were kind of a little infamous for being the one that got in trouble. Cause everyone's always like, I don't want to get in trouble. And we're like, well, do people really get in trouble? And then it's like, remember Annette, she got in trouble. So as far as like what your experience was with that, because that could be really scary. I mean, I don't know if you were like, am I going to get sued?
It was very scary. Yeah.
So,
and back in those days, I didn't know anyone else was thinking like me.
You're like, I'm alone here.
Yeah, so I'm all alone. And I actually emailed Chris Masterjohn and asked for his advice on it.
Yeah.
Responding and stuff. But it was very scary. But for me, at least, I mean, God, I knew was directing my path. And so, at one point, and for me, it was about like, I'm going to lose my identity. I mean, I don't know what else to be if I'm not a dietitian. Like, what am I? Who am I if I'm not a dietitian? And I could lose that. And so that it was a really like, so I really had to pray through that and just say, okay, God, if I have to lose my license, then so be it.
Mm-hmm.
Just do your thing, I guess. And so once I got past all of that, and fortunately, I am very good at writing and communicating. And so I actually was able to show in my first letter, some of the things they criticized me for, I was able to criticize them for the exact same things and just show them we're doing the same thing, kind of a thing. So that was just very interesting, but they didn't like it very much.
Well, it sounds like if you had gotten your license taken away, you could have maybe gone to law school and become a lawyer.
Yeah, I probably could have. Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't have to go to court. They did at the end. Of course, their last letter was like, we're really disappointed, that you haven't come around to our view. But we want you to use a disclaimer when you talk about fat. So the advice I give on fat is not sponsored, approved, recommended, or endorsed by the FDA, the USDA, the NIH, or the A&D, kind of a thing. I had to use that for a year. So what I found, I used it, and I was actually using that before all this happened because I'm ethical. And I told people, look, what I'm telling you is not the mainstream advice. And so you should consult your physician. And so usually when I said that, people would be, oh, good, then I want to hear what you have
I know,
to
right?
say.
It's like your biggest marketing tool is like, I'm not giving the standard advice that made you feel this, got you sick in the first place.
Right. Yeah. And then about 6 months after that one was finished, the Dietetic Association filed another complaint for the same thing, basically. But since I was using the disclaimer, the national organization defended me. So now I was free to really teach whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
It was great.
So, and this was what, like 10 plus years ago?
Yeah, it was in 2008.
So was that like, you've just been left alone now at this point?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh,
No one
that's
wants to
good.
me.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we're not going to bother. That's a lot of work for no result there. So, cool. Well, yeah, like I said, I wanted to talk about this a little bit because there is some level of concern with people who have alternate views on health, nutrition, whatever, especially, the last couple of years where now it's like, oh, if you don't agree with mainstream, you're like, a conspiracy theorist or something, right?
Right.
So I think it's good to know that as long as, and I feel like you should be able to defend if you're going against what the general guidelines are, you should have a good argument for why you're doing that. I don't think that's unreasonable to expect,
Oh,
so if somebody's doing something that they don't think is, 100% aligned with what they got taught, maybe just prepare to defend it and make sure you know why you're doing what you're doing and be able to support it. And maybe, a lot of this fear about being shut down or having your license taken away, like, as long as you're not doing something that is clearly dangerous and there is no evidence to support it, then I think there doesn't need to be as much fear as I think there is with some nutrition professionals that don't fully buy into everything that the government teaches about health.
right. Well, and so I actually grew up in a cult, not the gun packing sex kind, fortunately, but it was a very strict one. But God actually changed it from the top down. And I think I was around 28 when that occurred. But what I learned from that was that it's possible for me to be 100% convinced I'm right when I'm actually 90% wrong. And so that I think has served me really well because now I'm able to, and I kind of think of it as, I have open hands. So I have what I already believe in one hand, and I have the other hand is open to receive new ideas. And then I can compare those and play with them and kind of see, well, what makes more sense, what gives better results, and that kind of thing, and make decisions based on what I observe, what the science says. I don't just close my mind to things when I come to new things. And I think that's really what we need to do as people, and especially with our own bodies, paying attention to what feels good when what food we eat makes us feel good, what makes us feel bad, instead of just, oh, well, everybody's vegan, I'm going to be a vegan. Kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, now that I have a child, I feel like my nature of being a questioner and a bit of a rebel in some ways with the health space, like, I just feel like that's been put on steroids lately, because it's like just the number of things that they want to do to babies, right, as soon as they're born.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you actually look into it and you're like, there's literally no reason for this. Like, just as an example, like, I'm not an anti-vaxxer or whatever term people want to use, but for example, like, they want to give babies a hepatitis B vaccine within, hours of them being born. And anyone who has half a brain could see that, like, there is literally no need for that. If the mother doesn't have Hep B, where is a baby going to get exposed to Hep B straight out of the womb if their mother doesn't have it? And when you find out the reasoning for doing it has more to do with, like, let's, try to get rid of Hep B from the population by vaccinating babies. It's just like a policy decision. It just kind of makes you start to be like, well, what other policy decisions have they made that literally there's no point and isn't beneficial? And again, it's one of those, like, at best maybe is useless and at worst could cause harm. I mean, like, you don't know what kind of stuff could happen injecting a baby immediately out of the womb, kind of thing. And so, when that kind of stuff comes to mind and I start questioning things, it's like, it kind of takes you down this rabbit trail of like, well, what other things are they telling me to do as a mother to my precious little baby, that now I have that, like, mama bear energy that I'm like, no, I'm not doing that kind of thing. So it's one of these things where, like I said, I've always been a questioner with this stuff. I've always been kind of the one that's like trying to poke holes. And again, there's times that I've been wrong. I was super into, like, very low carb stuff when I was first learning about more formal nutrition, and then realized, like, hey, maybe that's not the best for premenopausal women to be experiencing, like, high stress hormones from super low carb diets. So I've changed my perspective on stuff before, but anytime somebody comes in and is like, this is what you have to do. Science is settled. If you don't do this, you're, fill in the blank kind of derogatory term. Like anytime people start to do that, that's when I start to get like, I'm going to look into this myself because I don't understand why you're so aggressive about this particular topic. So it has been interesting, just like the amount of research I had to do leading up to having my daughter. And then now that she's getting into the age, which she's only 2.5 months, but like that age of like, now there's all these things that we want to do to this baby. And it's like, but why? So I feel like, the nutrition thing was just like one part of my life that I was constantly questioning. And now it's like, great. Now there's all these other things I got to question. And it's like, how much time do I have to spend questioning, the advice of the quote unquote, the experts that, and I really don't think most of the doctors that recommend stuff or, the guidelines that they're promoting, I don't think the doctors are malicious. I think it's just like, where is this information coming from?
Yeah. They just don't know.
Yeah.
Because they question it.
Yeah. Well, it's like what they were taught, right? I mean, it's the same thing with dietetics. Like if you were taught it and you're not necessarily that kind of person that just like naturally is like, is that really true? Like if that's not your tendency, then, why would you think to question the stuff that is being taught to you in, an esteemed institution that you're paying a lot of money to learn from?
And everybody's teaching it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember in school with the food pyramid, that they have 6 to 11 servings of grain at the bottom. And I always wondered, because grains are not that nutritious compared to other foods. And so they were also saying, if you get Wonder Bread, that's like, get the Wonder Bread, 6 to 11 servings, and I could never figure out like, why would that be good?
Yeah.
Because, it doesn't really have any nutrition in it. But my thinking back then was, well, this is being taught in all the schools. So they must know what they're doing. I mean, why would they teach it if it was wrong? Kind of a thing. And so I think that happens a lot. We're taught what we're taught. We figure like nobody else has questioned it, so it must be true, right?
Yeah.
And so we just go with the flow.
Mm-hmm. Which I think, there's a lot of information we're getting all the time, whether it's in our profession or as a parent, like it takes a lot of energy to not just go with the flow, right? Like it's a lot easier to just trust, quote unquote, the experts, as opposed to doing any sort of looking into things yourself. And a lot of people aren't necessarily scientifically literate. So, and not to say that means that they can't look into things, but I think there's a lot of, just unpleasantness directed at people that Google stuff, right? Like, oh, right. my MD is, or your Google search does not equate to my doctoral education or whatever. And it's like, I just feel like it's so dismissive of people and condescending to say that. And it's not to say that, that you don't have more education or that you wouldn't be able to understand things a little bit better. But if people are questioning things, you don't just shut them down by saying, well, you don't know as much as I do, right? So it's very frustrating because it's like, I think people are just so dug in with their heels about stuff that it's like, I feel like we could be so much more advanced with human health and people's,
I think we could.
Yeah,
too.
With people's results. And it's like, because of all this red tape, because of all the, government and bureaucracy kind of stuff, it's like, people are still stuck in their ways and then nothing changes and we don't advance when we could be advancing. So to take like a nice hard turn here, I know you had wanted to talk about iodine because that's something that you're passionate about. And it sounds like maybe your passion for iodine also got stirred up with some of these shifts in your perspective on nutrition. So can you tell us a little bit about like, where did that come from that you started getting really interested in iodine?
Yeah. So when I was writing my paper to defend my credentials, I actually noticed iodine popping up in all kinds of different studies. So like epidemiological, animal studies, everything. And I just thought, well, this is really weird. Like it's everywhere. How come nobody ever talks about it? Like iodine is clearly involved with heart disease. And if you look at the population, about half of them are hypothyroid and half of them have heart disease. And, so there's definitely a connection there. And I saw it in the research and nobody was talking about it. So that's really what piqued my interest. And then I heard a lecture from Dr. Brownstein. And he tests all of his patients for iodine. He has used this for all kinds of women's health issues with really amazing results. And so when I started really looking into iodine, it used to be called the Swiss Army knife of medicine. And it was all over the Merck manual. It was like the go-to remedy for just about everything. And then all of a sudden, like nobody's ever heard of it or they're afraid of it. And that all happened in the 1940s with a study that involved rats, and they fed them iodine. And the conclusion was that the iodine caused hypothyroidism. The problem with the study, though, is that they never tested the rats for any kind of thyroid issue. And so the study was one of those, which is very common. I mean, this is what I found in my research. It's very common that study results don't reflect the study data.
Mm.
And so, but that it was that one study. And then one of the people who did the study went to the National Institutes of Health in, I think, 1969 and just reproduced that basically. And basically, he created iodophobia, which is the fear of iodine in the medical community. So, and we had all these other drugs, penicillin and everything. So, we had other like Swiss Army knives, I guess, in the toolbox. But we actually used to use iodine for breast cancer in the 1800s. And today, nobody talks about iodine in connection with breast cancer. October's coming up. I think this will air actually in October, which is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And nobody is going to talk about iodine. And that's one of the main causes of breast cancer. And for me, I feel like people should at least have the information so they can make truly informed decisions. And that's really what I'm about. And I believe the truth is such that it is perfectly fine answering questions and debating. It's when we don't have the truth that we want to shut everything down. Because the truth can overcome a lie, but a lie can never overcome the truth.
So with the iodine thing, it's interesting because, as most people probably know, at least people listening, we have iodine added to our food supply, mostly in salt, right? So my thought is like, okay, there can't be this like total fear of it because they put it into the salt. So they must know that, okay, there's some need for it, right? So where do you feel like the line gets drawn where it's like, okay, now we're getting into like, fear territory with iodine?
Yeah, so I think the line really is that most people think iodine just affects the thyroid, and so it's all about goiter. And so there's a limited amount of iodine that you need to prevent goiter. And once you've done that, like that's it for iodine. And what people don't realize is that you actually store iodine in your breast tissue, your ovaries. So anything like endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, cysts, fibroids in both breasts and ovaries are going to be an iodine deficiency issue. And we need more iodine than just to prevent goiter for those other things. And so I think that's where kind of the breakdown is. And then with the iodized salt, most of the iodine has evaporated by the time you buy it. So you're not really getting a whole lot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then in the 70s, they replaced iodine in bread with bromide. And bromide is one of the antagonists of iodine. And so I don't know if you ever watched the Munsters. It was like
I know the reference. I don't know if I've ever seen the episode, but I feel like I've at least seen clips.
Yeah, so it's this family of monsters, and then they have this niece who's a normal human. So iodine is like the normal human, and chlorine, fluoride, and or chlorine, fluoride, and bromide are the monster family. Only they're not nice, like the monsters are.
Yeah.
But they all will bind to iodine receptors in the body, and every cell has an iodine receptor. So we need it everywhere, even in the brain. So even things like anxiety and depression can be related to iodine deficiency. And so we have all these toxins in our environment now that most of them contain either bromide, fluoride, or chlorine. And so we're getting all these toxins in, we're not getting enough iodine. And then, we have all these health problems and we wonder why.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would assume, chloride or chlorine and fluoride, that's in our water supply, right?
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, if you're not using I don't know what quality of filter would be required to totally eliminate that kind of stuff, which I will admit we're not using a filter that probably is very effective at getting rid of all of that. But, between that and then, like you said, the bromide in the bread products, which I'm sure most people the average American is eating regular bread products. They're not necessarily eating stuff that's skipping those ingredients.
Right.
The point about the iodine evaporating out of the salt, I feel like I've probably heard that before because I have seen Dr. Brownstein talk as well, but it's been a while since I saw him. So, he might have mentioned that, but I must have forgotten it because I don't think I do iodine in salt because we do like either the pink salt or the sea salt kind of thing. But I know that I'm taking a prenatal that has iodine in it. So, but it's probably not a dose that would be considered therapeutic, maybe. Because I remember Dr. Brownstein was talking about like milligram, right? Milligram doses versus
like 12.5 milligrams is
the
minimum.
Yeah, like I remember I used to take small amounts of that iodoral supplement, which I think was 12.5 milligrams in a pill. I wouldn't necessarily do the full pill, but maybe do parts of it. But I think the prenatal has like 225 micrograms or something. Yeah, which obviously, like you said, is enough to prevent goiter, prevent frank deficiency. But just because something's preventing frank deficiency doesn't mean that it's optimal. Right. Like, I think a lot of the micronutrient guidelines that we have in our country are based on avoiding serious deficiency symptoms as opposed to optimizing health. Is that your experience with iodine and other micronutrients?
And, everything else too.
Mm-hmm. Or are there certain ones like my mom and I are like super into vitamin A. I know that sounds really dorky, but that's one of those that most people are not getting. And anytime I see a woman taking a prenatal that's like either just beta carotene, or there's this one company that shall remain nameless, but there's one company that makes a prenatal that has no vitamin A in it at all, not even beta carotene. And I see these women taking it and then they have their baby and then they're like talking about how they're struggling with breast milk production. And I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if that was related to maybe iodine as well, because you said it's stored in breast tissue, but like vitamin A deficiency, not being able to produce enough breast milk for your baby. And it's horrible because, that's super stressful. And it's like, the trauma that these women go through trying to feed their baby breast milk when they can't produce enough, and thinking, what if you had just taken at least some vitamin A leading up to birth? And I know vitamin A is a really controversial nutrient, especially with prenatal and pregnancy and everything. But I was actually talking to Chris about this when he was visiting the other day about, he said that pretty much any birth defects that are going to happen from excessive vitamin A intake during pregnancy are in the first 8 weeks. And then after that, you're like, good, as far as vitamin A is concerned. I'm like, 8 weeks? That's like, I barely knew I was pregnant. I like knew I was pregnant for like 3 weeks at that point. And it's like, one of these things where women are afraid of vitamin A throughout the whole pregnancy. And then again, having trouble breastfeeding and stuff afterwards. So I have a lot of thoughts about these things that have been stewing since I was on maternity leave. So I would imagine that iodine's a similar issue where it's like, you probably see it all the time, where you see people that or, friends or friends' children or people that are having trouble with certain health issues. And you're like, oh, if you could just do this thing and you weren't afraid of it, or your doctor would tell you, and it's hard to have that knowledge and not feel like you can share it with people.
Yeah. And I had a client who was scheduled to have a hysterectomy, and she lost her insurance, which turned out to be a really great thing because I put her on iodine, and 6 months later she had insurance, but she didn't need the hysterectomy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really quite powerful. And it really makes me sad that women go to the doctor. We usually get dismissed. We're not really listened to. And then if we have any kind of an issue, we either get a birth control pill or an antidepressant, or we have our uterus taken out. And none of those things fixes any of the problems that we go in there with.
Mm-hmm.
And so like vitamin A would be something that could actually fix a problem.
Yeah.
Iodine can fix the problem. But we don't get any of those options because we're kind of in the drug and cut approach to healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that we really need to change.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think that's something that is part of my passion for helping entrepreneurs grow their businesses, because when you're an entrepreneur and you have your own business and you're not taking insurance, you can kind of do whatever. I don't want to say whatever you want. I mean, within reason, obviously, right? Like, you're not going to start like bloodletting or something, right? But when you have this information about certain nutrients and you can help people with it, I hate that it has to be expensive, because you have to be able to, have a living to, and some people are sole breadwinners or single and they need to be able to pay their bills. And so for that to happen and for you to not totally burn out with like 40 hours a week of clients, you have to charge a pretty substantial amount of money for your time. But I do think that the people that are in those kind of roles are the ones that are able to really be almost like boots on the ground, using these alternative solutions that really do work and really help people and help them avoid, like you said, hysterectomies and all this other stuff that could be I don't think removing somebody's organ is necessarily the optimal solution, right? Like usually that would be like last resort kind of thing. And so I do think that entrepreneurs in the health and nutrition space have an opportunity to do what they think is best and actually be outcome driven. And you could be like, our goal is for you to keep your uterus. So let's do whatever we can for you to keep your uterus, as opposed to it being like, well, insurance is going to cover a hysterectomy and that's the standard of care for this particular illness. So that's what you're getting for this. So for me, like helping nutritionists and other health entrepreneurs get their business established and learn how to market their services to people when it's self-pay, which is harder than when you take insurance. And not to say that you can't take insurance, but usually when you're taking insurance, there's like parameters as far as what you can do. Being able to show people how you can serve them and help them get these outcomes, I think is actually, it goes beyond just making money, right? It's like actually being able to really make an impact on people. So I think that's really cool that, you being in business for so long and almost quitting because of the the craziness that you experience, and being able to come out of it and be like even more just confident in what you're doing for people, and being willing to take those risks and being willing to go against the grain, because this is how I can help people and they can actually get great results, as opposed to having to settle for surgical or pharmaceutical interventions that maybe weren't even necessary or helpful.
Yeah. And then if you really think about it, there might be a higher upfront cost, but long run, it's actually going to save you money, because you're not going to have to be on these drugs for the rest of your life. You're not going to have to start new drugs. Especially if you take out your uterus, you're going to have some problems down the road.
Yeah.
It's not like you just pop a pill or cut something out and, oh, I'm better now.
Mm-hmm.
You never get better.
Yeah.
Something else, you have to take another drug to combat the side effects of the first drug, and, on and on. And then how do you feel? I mean, is your quality of life really good? Are you joyful? Can you do all the things that you want to do? There's so much more to health than just, maybe the symptom that you have right now.
Mm-hmm. And if it's something like breast cancer, I mean, that could be the difference between living longer and surviving versus not. And I mean, I don't know how you put a price tag on any of that, but it's one of these things where, and that's honestly one of the reasons why in the work that I do, I love helping people articulate what they can help somebody achieve, because sometimes people just don't understand what's possible for them when they do take these alternative approaches, or maybe do things a little bit different than what they've been told. And so you have to learn, as an entrepreneur in the health space, you have to learn how to communicate what you can help someone with, of course, not, guaranteeing, yes, this will happen. Yes, you will keep your uterus. I guarantee it. Like, you're not going to make bold, unsubstantiated claims like that. But at least you could say, hey, there's a possibility that you could not have to get this surgery if we're able to do XYZ, and I can help you with that. And so, just making people aware of what the possibilities are, that, how much better their life could be if they go this route versus just accepting what they've been presented and dealing with the consequences and just believing, well, that's as good as it's going to be for me. And I guess that's just my luck as far as my health is concerned.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the problems, is that people just accept that this is normal, that it's normal to be tired all the time, or, it's normal to be anxious about everything or depressed or whatever it is. And it's not normal. And menopause, having symptoms of menopause is not normal. That should be like the time when women are really at their peak and enjoying every piece of life. And we don't, because we eat all these crappy foods beforehand, and we're not getting the nutrients we need. Like the vitamin A is really important. I'm a big one on that one too. Iodine, just all these things. And that's what's really sad for me, is that we settle when really we could be living a very vibrant and abundant life if we just asked some questions, or maybe took some time to look into some things. But I think overall, people need to have a choice. So I think if you go to the doctor and they give you the choice, well, let's try the iodine and the vitamin A, or here's some surgery or a drug. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
But at least give them like all the options that they have. And, if they want to go down the quick fix route that doesn't actually, it'll fix it in the moment, but not long term, that's their choice.
Yeah. And I feel like, unfortunately, we see other people, the vast majority of people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis probably are experiencing poor health, or, as women, I don't spend a lot of time with women that are in menopause, because most of my friends are kind of in that like 25 to 45 age range, but early 40s is starting to head in that direction. And so, you just get used to seeing, this is how it is, quote unquote, because this is how all the people I spend time with, this is how my sister was, this is how my mom was. And it's like, you don't realize just because that's common doesn't mean that it's actually supposed to be that way. So, in the interest of time, because I feel like we could probably keep going about lots of things, and it's been so fun chatting with you, Annette, and we'll have to have you back on the show at some time in the future.
Yeah,
I know that before we hit record, you were telling me that you have a program that is relaunching that should be, I think, available by the time this episode comes out. So do you want to tell our audience about how you can help them if they're the kind of client you work with?
Yes. So yes, I'm beta testing it right now. So it'll be available starting in October. And it's called Revived Woman. And it's really all about helping women get their life and their joy back. And so we do all the things. We boost all the nutrients that you need that you don't even know that you're missing, like vitamin A. And, one of the things that our low fat, I call it a cult, did, was it took vitamin A out of the diet, because all the saturated fat is where you find vitamin A generally. And so we've been without that for a very long time. But we boost the nutrients. We work on the whole body. So we're also looking at making sure that we're looking at beliefs that are limiting us or holding us back, any kind of unforgiveness, especially for ourselves. I think women especially are really hard on themselves. And that's something that we have to get past and realize just really how spectacular we are, and how loved we are. So we work on those kinds of things as well. And grounding, getting sun, just the whole thing. So all the things that you need in your life to truly bring about joy, energy, and having the life that you really want and enjoy.
Is there a particular age range or, health condition that you feel like this program is really suited for?
Yeah, so usually probably around 30 to 55. And if you have any kind of female issue, if you're like depression, anxiety, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, if you're worried about breast cancer, if you have that in your family, those kinds of things.
Cool. And it's funny because I feel like sometimes with entrepreneurship, I'm in this weird world of like having the health background and working with health experts and just, having an alternative viewpoint about health. And then I'm in the entrepreneur space where people are very focused on performance and improving their energy and that kind of thing. And it's funny, like a lot of times I'm not seeing the overlap that I wish I would see because, entrepreneurs are the kind of people that like, they want to do it if it's going to help them kind of thing, but they don't always get the best information because unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that you and I are familiar with in the health space is not mainstream yet. It's not like in vogue or whatever. So it's one of these things where there's not as much overlap as I wish that there was. And I don't know. I just feel like with entrepreneurs, they're the kind of people who are willing to invest in anything that could make their life better, give them more energy, allow them to feel more peace, especially because when you're doing something like an online business or self-employment, like there is a lot of stress. There is a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, you don't ever get to a place where there's like zero uncertainty with your business. And so being able to handle that because you have good mental health and good emotional regulation and good energy and you feel great, I think that's super important, possibly even more important than the exact strategy you're taking to grow your business. So I would love to see more overlap there. And, if anyone's listening that has vibed with what Annette was talking about and wants to check out her program, we'll make sure to link to that in the notes for this episode. What's the name of the program, just so people can make sure they're looking at the right thing?
Yeah, Revived Woman.
Awesome. And we'll link to that so you guys can go check out the notes and the Fed and Fearless podcast. That'll be over on laurschoenfeldrd.com. And Annette, it's been so great to chat with you. And I feel like the conversation went a lot of places, but I think we kept it kind of all related. So it's just been really great to get to chat with you about your experience in the nutrition space, being a business owner, and then also having some unique viewpoints about what actually helps people feel their best and being able to stand up for what you believe in, even in the face of some pretty challenging circumstances. So it's very inspiring to me, and I'm sure it's inspiring to the people listening too.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to have been here. So this was fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks to all of you for hanging out with us and listening to this episode. And we'll look forward to seeing you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura here again. If you're anything like the hundreds of health and nutrition entrepreneurs that I've worked with over the past few years, you want to create an efficient, structured, and organized online health office that saves you time, maximizes your impact and your income, and provides a great experience for your clients. But maybe you've been told falsely that all you need is free tools like Google Calendar and Google Drive to make that happen. Or maybe you know that you need to use a client management software like Practice Better, but you feel overwhelmed trying to figure out how to set it up in a way that actually saves you time rather than wasting it. Either way, the fact is you need a well-oiled client management system, one that works for you like a team member if you want to have a successful online health and nutrition business. And in my brand new free training, I'm going to teach you the 6 essential steps to set up Practice Better for a more profitable and efficient virtual health and wellness business. I'll give you the step-by-step system for setting up your client management software that will get you out of the day-to-day admin work and back into the role of the high-level health and nutrition professional where you belong. I'll also show you how my client Jackie used these exact principles to help her make over $200,000 in revenue in her first full year of business, while also preparing to become a first-time mom. And by the end of this 60-minute training, you'll finally know the best way to create an efficient, structured, and organized online health office that saves you time, maximizes your impact and income, and provides an amazing front-end experience for your clients and customers. To get access to this exclusive brand new training, go to practicebettertraining.com and select the training day and time you'd like to attend. And don't worry if you can't make any of the times listed. We'll be sending the replay to all registrants, so just be sure to look for an email from hello@laurschoenfeldrd.com to get your personal link to join the training. Having a well-organized client management system is a non-negotiable when it comes to building a financially successful online health business that doesn't burn you out. And I can't wait to show you the exact steps to doing so in the fastest and most efficient way possible. Go to practicebettertraining.com to sign up now, and I look forward to seeing you on the training.